This story takes place in England back in 2011. It's about a 17-year-old named Emily Longley who was, full of hope and had this really bright future ahead of her. But unfortunately, all of her plans just fell apart. This case ended up getting a lot of attention, and not just because of the tragic death of a young woman, but also because of everything that happened after she died. All right, so Emily Longley was born in England in 1994 to her parents, Mark and Caroline. And then 2 years later, they had another daughter, Emily's younger sister, Hannah. From what everyone says, the girls were super close right from the start, just a really loving and caring family. When Emily was about 9 and Hannah was 7, the whole family moved to New Zealand, and they made Auckland their new home. But at some point after the move, it seems Emily started hanging out with the wrong crowd. So her parents, who were pretty middle class, decided it would be best to send her back to the UK to live with her grandparents and get a fresh start. So in 2010, Emily flew back to England to go to a place called Brockenhurst College. Her plan was to get a business degree, and she also had this dream of becoming a model. While she was in England, she was staying with her grandparents at their house in Bournemouth. Now, Bournemouth, uh, it's a popular resort town right on the English Channel coast in the county of Dorset. It's right next to another town called Poole. Um, at the time Emily moved back to England, her sister Hannah was still in school, and her parents, Mark and Caroline, had actually divorced. But they kept things friendly. And Emily, well, she was a really beautiful young woman, and she definitely turned a lot of heads. It was there that she met a 20-year-old guy named Elliot Turner, and apparently he made a pretty big impression on her. Over time, they started talking more and more, and it eventually grew into a romantic relationship. Then, in April of 2011, Emily flew back to New Zealand to visit her family. She hadn't seen them in about 6 months. Her dad, Mark, met her at the airport. She just ran right up to him and gave him this huge hug, telling him how much she'd missed him. They had a really, really close relationship. He just adored her and would say he missed everything: her smile, her laugh, even her dirty jokes. The next day, the whole family went out to Emily's favorite pizza place, and she was telling her parents all about her life back in England, how besides her college classes, she was doing some modeling work and had made some really great friends. And of course, she mentioned the guy she was dating, this 20-year-old Elliot Turner. They'd only been together for a few months, and she told them she felt like she was maybe too young for anything really serious. She even mentioned that, well, she thought she was probably going to end things with him when she got back. After that conversation, Emily spent the next few weeks just hanging out with her friends and family. And it sounds like she had a wonderful time. Just nobody had any idea that they were going to lose her so soon. When it was time for her flight to board, saying goodbye to her family was really tough. But Emily promised she'd be back in 5 months. She wanted to be there for the Rugby World Cup, which was set to start on September 9th. A few days later, she was texting with her dad, and she let him know that she'd broken up with Elliot. She didn't really get into the details, though. Apparently, Elliot had started acting strangely after he saw some photos Emily posted on social media while she was in New Zealand. There were other guys in these pictures, and, well, Elliot got extremely jealous. So this guy, Elliot Turner, he was 20 years old and the son of a wealthy jeweler, so on the surface, his life seemed pretty carefree. He was a familiar face in the bars and clubs around Bournemouth and Poole. He was even part of this group of rich kids they called the Firm. His own friends called him All Talk Turner because he was always boasting about things. He and Emily had met back in December of 2010, and for a while, the two of them were really living the high life at the resort, partying late into the night. But here's the thing about Turner. He had a history of being obsessive with women, and it wasn't long before he started showing these really jealous signs with Emily. Because of that, their relationship pretty quickly escalated into these intense, sometimes violent arguments. People who knew him described him in a very specific way. They said he could be threatening, aggressive, and violent, and just had this incredibly controlling and possessive nature. I mean, this wasn't new behavior. Back in January of 2008, when he was only 16, he actually got a harassment warning from the police. They had to tell him to stop contacting an ex-girlfriend because he was just bombarding her with texts and emails after she broke up with him. Turner loved, absolutely loved, being the center of attention, and he never had to work for a living. His parents pretty much gave him everything he wanted, and Elliot was apparently very skilled at manipulating people, his parents included. His whole life just revolved around parties, women, alcohol, and drugs. He really seemed to think he was a guy who could do whatever he wanted. He even started carrying a hammer with him just in case anyone tried to argue with him. Some of his friends said they believed Turner kind of fancied himself a gangster, like he wanted to be the guy that everyone would turn to for help. He was the type of guy who would walk into a bar and buy a round for the entire place. Elliot would brag about driving his new Mini Cooper, but the thing is, it was actually a gift from his grandmother. He worked hard to keep up this bad boy image, posting all these, streetwise messages on social media where he'd call himself things like Scarface or even God. Look, he didn't have a problem getting attention from women, but when he met Emily, he got very, very attached to her. In a way, she fit the image of a successful guy that he was trying so hard to create. And as their relationship went on, Turner started showing that controlling side of his personality more and more. It got to the point where he even threatened to kill her. A few months before she died, Emily actually wrote him this emotional note, and it was basically a plea to him. In it, she said she loved him, but she begged him to stop saying he was going to kill her. She also asked him to stop talking about his ex-girlfriends and to stop being so aggressive all the time. She wrote that he needed to be more cool because that was more attractive and that he was scaring her because of how intimidating he was. So as Turner started to show his true colors and his controlling behavior just went way over the line, Emily realized this was not the kind of person she wanted to be with. But someone like Turner isn't going to take rejection well. On the evening of May 6, 2011, Emily was out with some friends at a local club. There's actually surveillance footage of her showing up at the nightclub with her friends. And that same evening, Turner somehow got into her Facebook messages and he found out that Emily had been seeing another guy. And that just sent him into a rage. So he shows up at the club and starts arguing with Emily. The whole thing ends with her throwing a drink in his face. He was apparently just verbally abusing her, threatening her with violence. He didn't like what Emily was wearing, and he thought her outfit was too revealing. He just completely dismissed the fact that she had already broken up with him. This man was clearly not going to let her go. At this point, Elliot had completely ruined her evening, so she decided to leave. But her ex-boyfriend followed her out. His friends later told police they heard him say something truly awful. Something along the lines of him being willing to kill her, that he'd go to prison for it and still be a millionaire. He apparently said doing 10 years wouldn't even bother him. Somehow, Turner caught up with Emily and convinced her to go back to his house, telling her he just wanted to talk things over in a more relaxed place. Now, Elliot Turner lived with his parents, and you have to wonder if maybe that's why Emily agreed to go with him. Maybe she thought he'd act a little calmer with his parents around. Neighbors saw the two of them go inside the house. Then, the next morning, at about 9 a.m., Elliot's mother, Anita Turner, called emergency services, telling them that Emily wasn't waking up. Before the ambulance got there, Anita was on the phone with the operator who was giving her instructions on how to help Emily. But unfortunately, by the time paramedics arrived, there was nothing they could do. They had to pronounce Emily Longley dead at the scene. Anita, his mother, was originally from Indonesia and had come to the UK to marry Elliot's father, Lee Turner. And when they had their son Elliot, they apparently never denied him anything, which, turned out to be a big mistake. It's interesting, during that call with the emergency operator, Anita's voice just didn't sound like a mother who just found her son's girlfriend dead. She was just very calm, almost as if nothing unusual was happening. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in New Zealand, Emily's father, Mark, woke up around 2 in the morning. He saw he had a bunch of missed calls from his ex-wife, Caroline, and his younger daughter, Hannah. There was also a voicemail from Hannah, but Mark could barely understand what she was saying through the tears. Then he heard Caroline just scream in the background, and he heard her say the words, "Emily is dead." Mark just refused to believe it. He immediately called his own mother back in England, and when she answered the phone, his entire world just fell apart. His mom was just crying hysterically, and a few moments later, a police officer took the phone from her. The officer had to be the one to tell him, very formally that he was sorry, but his daughter Emily was gone. Mark just couldn't process it. I mean, just a week ago, Emily had been sitting on his couch, smiling. Even on the flight to the UK, the grieving father just couldn't accept that his daughter was really dead. But of course, it wasn't a dream. Losing their oldest daughter was just a heartbreaking, awful challenge for Emily's parents. Initially, the police told them that it looked like Emily had just died in her sleep. But that didn't make any sense. She was so young and healthy. The police collected what evidence they could, but it really wasn't clear what had happened to Emily. They told the family they'd have to wait for the autopsy results. Elliot Turner's parents, Anita and Lee, they told investigators that they were home all night and didn't hear anything suspicious. And Elliot himself was publicly acting like a grieving boyfriend, posting photos of him and Emily together on his Facebook page. At this point, the police had nothing solid to disprove the story that the Turners were telling, that Emily had just mysteriously died in her sleep. In any death investigation, the first major step is figuring out the cause of death. Once investigators know that, they know what they're dealing with and how to move forward. So while they were waiting on the autopsy, investigators found something strange that Emily had posted on her Facebook page just a few days before she died. She wrote something like, "I have a stalker." She went on to describe how someone had just called her, and when she asked who it was, the person on the other end said that she didn't know him, but he knew everything about her. Emily apparently asked how he got her number, and he was vague, saying he'd tell her when he saw her and just kept asking her out. She wrote that she hung up, but they wouldn't stop calling. And this was posted on Thursday, May 5th. At the same time, the police confirmed that Emily had that big public argument with Elliot at the nightclub. And after interviewing some of Turner's friends, investigators learned that he was trying to control Emily's every move, that he had found out about her seeing another guy, and this is the most important part, that Elliot had threatened to kill her many times. But his friends, they just didn't take it seriously. They thought it was all just talk. Turner trying to build up his gangster image. The autopsy came back, but it didn't give a definite exact cause of death. However, the experts did mention that it could have been strangulation. One of them said that the physical findings were, in his words, entirely consistent with pressure being applied to the neck. So investigators started to believe that at least one of the Turner family members was involved in Emily's death, and they decided to get a warrant to install listening devices inside their house. The police were hoping to find out if the family was hiding something, and it turns out they were right. On the recordings, they heard Elliot coaching his mother, Anita. He was telling her what to say, what to think, trying to make her story sound believable. He was trying to justify why he didn't realize she was dead at first, suggesting she should say she just thought Emily was knackered, or that he'd had trouble waking her up before. He told his mom to say she'd made Emily a cup of tea first because she thought she was okay. Telling her that story was completely believable. They also heard Elliot's own private agony and anger. He was recorded saying how the situation was burning him inside, eating him up every second of the day. And in one angry rant, he was recorded talking about someone spitting in his face, just pure rage. It was clear from the tapes that Elliot was instructing his mother on how to handle the police. His father, Lee Turner, seemed to be the only one who understood that what they were doing was wrong, but in the end, it sounds like he just went along with his son and his wife. And while listening to these secret recordings, investigators also heard exactly what happened to Emily Longley. Because on those tapes, Elliot Turner admitted that he was the one who killed her. Police arrested Elliot Turner about a week after Emily's death. He, of course, denied everything. His lawyers tried to argue that the audio recordings weren't authentic and shouldn't be used. But after looking at all the evidence, the judge allowed the prosecution to use the recordings in court. Not knowing that police were listening to his every word, Elliot had admitted how angry he felt every day and that no one had ever made him as furious as Emily did. When the trial started in May of 2012, his lawyers argued that their client was just acting in self-defense. Elliot Turner claimed that the argument in his bedroom turned violent and that he had to grab Emily by the neck. He insisted that he didn't strangle her, just that he found her dead in his bed the next morning. On the second day of the trial, Turner told the court he was disgusted with himself for what he did that night. He claimed that after finding Emily dead, he'd written a letter to his mother saying how ashamed he was and that he was planning to leave for Spain. You could guess from this that maybe Elliot Turner was planning to flee the country right after Emily's death, but for some reason, he changed his mind. And it lines up with what police saw when they first arrived at the house. They saw packed bags, and Elliot's passport was in his pocket. He admitted in court that he had threatened Emily and that he felt upset and deceived on the night she died because he'd seen some fake-looking emails on her phone emails that said he had smashed her face into a table. When he described their final fight, he claimed that Emily started hitting him with her hands and feet. He said he tried to calm her down before eventually giving up and just throwing a 20-pound note at her for a cab. He told the court that at first, she just ignored him. But then he said 5 seconds later, she just went crazy. He claimed he had never seen Emily get that enraged before and that he just didn't know what to do. He claimed that she wouldn't stop and that he kept telling her to stop it and calm down. He said it was at that point that he grabbed her by the neck with his right hand. When his defense lawyer asked him why he did that, Turner said it was to stop her from, in his words, going nuts. He claimed he didn't know what else to do and that his right hand made contact with her neck. The lawyer then asked him how hard he had grabbed her. Turner's response was that he wouldn't say very hard, but that it was quite hard. He said he grabbed her, pushed her down onto the bed, and then pressed down on her neck while she was lying there. He claimed he only held her there for about 5 or 6 seconds before letting go and storming out of the room. When the lawyer asked if he intended to kill Emily, Turner said no. He said he just thought Emily had gone to sleep. He alleged that he only realized Emily was dead the next morning when she didn't wake up. Later, in an interview with the Herald newspaper, Emily's father, Mark, spoke about how incredibly hard it was to lose his daughter. He talked about the nature of death, about how much it sucks. He said it doesn't matter if it's your child or your partner or even your 99-year-old grandmother, it just sucks. The fact that a person can be there one day and gone the next, well, he said it's just not something we can deal with easily. He spoke about how all the anniversaries are hard, birthdays are hard, Christmas is hard. And he said Easter is also really tough because that was the last time he really got to spend quality time with her. He said the heaviest part for him was knowing he would never get to see the woman she could have become. He missed, as he put it, seeing the life she was denied unfold. He felt they had just gotten a brief glimpse of the woman she was becoming, and he was so, so proud of her. He said that, of course, he's her father and he's biased, but he truly believed the world was a better place with her in it. It was certainly, he said, a lot more fun. Back at the trial, the prosecution really portrayed Elliot Turner as this spoiled, wealthy kid whose parents were willing to help him escape punishment. The court heard how he was basically given the run of the family's home in an affluent part of Bournemouth, where he would throw these big parties for his friends. His own father, Lee, described him as wild, and he was given his own separate living space in the converted garage so he could come and go as he pleased without disturbing his parents. And it was in that room, which even had its own minibar, that he strangled Emily on his bed. When police looked at the computers they seized from Turner's home, they found some pretty damning search history. Things like death by strangulation and how to avoid punishment for a crime. The main motive for the crime was jealousy. The court also heard testimony from a guy named Luke Ashford, who had apparently spent the night with Emily, and as we know, Elliot Turner had found out about it. Even while he was in custody, Turner was boasting. In letters he wrote to his friends from his prison cell, he was apparently saying that the jury would believe his twisted story about Emily attacking him and him just acting in self-defense. He was already planning for his acquittal, saying he would soon be driving a new Range Rover and moving to Spain. He apparently even had plans to sell the rights to his story and live some kind of fashionable life. But the jury shattered those illusions pretty quickly when they found him guilty. On May 22, 2012, the court sentenced Elliot Turner to life in prison, with a minimum of 16 years. When she announced the verdict, the judge, Mrs. Justice Dobbs, described Turner as a man with striking arrogance. She told him that Emily was a lovely, kind, and fun-loving girl who brought a ray of sunshine to people she met. She said that he had extinguished that light suddenly and needlessly. The judge told Turner directly that he didn't love Emily, that she was just a trophy to him. The relationship, she said, was all about him, all about a control he carried out with aggression and threats. And then she told him he could put away any thoughts he had of champagne, Bentleys, and girls and instead concentrate on the reason he was serving a life sentence. The judge also gave Turner another 9-month sentence to be served at the same time for perverting the course of justice. But Elliot Turner wasn't the only one on trial. His parents, Anita and Lee, who had apparently funded his lavish party lifestyle, loved their son so much that they tried to help him cover up the crime. Lee destroyed that confession letter, and Anita took the jacket from the bedroom where the letter was supposed to be. His mother even delayed calling for an ambulance, giving her son time to cover his tracks and allowing the family to get their story straight for the police. When she was asked why she didn't call for an ambulance right away, Anita Turner just replied that she didn't believe Emily was actually dead. During cross-examination, she was asked if she thought Emily had ruined her son's life. After a long 6-second pause, she just said no. And on that secret recording, Lee had been heard asking Anita if they had done the right thing. Anita's reply was clear. She told him, "We've done the right thing." Both Anita Turner, who was 51, and Lee Turner, who was 54, were found guilty of perverting the course of justice. Point two. They were each sentenced to 27 months in prison. Mrs. Justice Linda Dobbs said that the two of them chose to fight the case and showed very little remorse. She spoke to Mr. Turner specifically, saying that while he claimed he didn't know what was in the letter when he destroyed it, the fact that it was burning on his conscience was obvious from the anguished tone of his voice on the tape. The parents were released in 2013 after serving about half of their sentence, and they still live in the very same house where Emily Longley died. Point three. After the case was over, Emily's dad, Mark, broke down as he spoke about the verdicts. He was supported by his ex-wife, Caroline, and their daughter, Hannah. He said that what they had heard over the 5 weeks of the trial had shocked and disgusted them. The idea that a man as evil as Turner could treat a gentle, loving girl like Emily so violently was just beyond belief. He talked about how proud they were that she had come halfway around the world to make a better life for herself, a life that Turner then decided to end. Mark said there was a lot of talk about Turner's boasting and how no one took his threats seriously until it was too late. He added that even Turner's own mother didn't take him seriously when he texted her that he was going to break Emily's neck. He wondered that perhaps if someone had taken those threats seriously, Emily might still be with them today, and he said he hoped Turner suffers every single day in prison for what he has done. In October 2020, there were reports in the press that Elliot Turner had been beaten up by his cellmates in prison. Apparently, it happened after he hung up photos of Emily in his cell and was bragging about getting letters from female fans. Some of the inmates attacked him after he reportedly said he'd soon be back to his life of champagne, Bentleys, and birds. In 5 years, Turner will have the right to apply for early release from prison. You can only hope that common sense will prevail and that the parole board will make the right decision when it comes to someone who, to this day, has shown no remorse for his actions.